is Traci Chen and I'm an immigration lawyer. I am the principal lawyer at Mason Chen Law Group. We have a number of lawyers and migration agents who work across Australia. I'll drop a link below with our contact details for those who want to get in contact with us to have a consult with myself or one of our migration lawyers or agents. So today's video is about permanent residency pathways for those who are in IT occupations. So first of all, I just want to discuss what type of occupation we'd be talking about. So IT occupations is very broad, but it is for those with a profession with an ICT major. So we're not talking about graphic designers or, ICT sales representatives, for example. We're talking about software engineers, ICT business analysts, as well as computer network professionals. Now, this is just going to be a very broad kind of overview of what visas they can apply for and a very basic overview of the eligibility requirements for these visas. First of all, because this is about applying for a visa that is permanent residency in Australia, or at least it leads to permanent residency in Australia, basically all these visas, par the 482 temporary skills shortage for some passport holders, you may not need a skills assessment. So all the other visas I'll talk about today definitely need a skills assessment, has to be assessed by the assessing body, which is Australian Computer Society. But for the 482 temporary skills shortage visa, basically you can apply for this and the skills assessment is only required for some passport holders. So a very general overview, you need a full skills assessment for a lot of these visas that I'm going to talk about today. So to get a positive skills assessment, if you have an overseas degree with an ICT major, then you need at least 2 years of post-qualification work experience in that occupation. So for example, if you completed a Bachelor of Information Technology with a major in software engineering, then you need to have worked as a software engineer post-qualification overseas for 2 years to get a full skills assessment by the Australian Computer Society. If you completed that degree here in Australia, so for example, a Bachelor of Information Technology with a major in business analytics, then you would either have to work for 1 year as an ICT business analyst post-qualification, or you complete the professional year program in Australia. Those are the very two basic requirements to be able to get a skills assessment. Now, if you didn't study an ICT major degree, there are some other pathways, but basically you need more work experience. I'll drop a link below to the requirements for the Australian Computer Society, but those are the two very basic and most common ways to get a skills assessment. So just remember, for most of these visas, you're going to need to pass an English test. For example, for the skilled visas, the 491, 189, 190, all of those, you need a minimum of competent English, which is 6 in each band for English. However, you may have seen my other videos that basically 6 in each band would be very hard to get an invitation for any of the skilled visas. So you probably need to be aiming for 8 in each band, which a lot of people actually sit the PTE English test instead, which equates to 79 in each band, which would be superior English. And that's just across the board because that's what everybody else is scoring. So when my clients ask me, do I need to score 8 each? I say, yeah, you do, because like the other applicants in the pool, they're scoring 8 in each band as well. So first of all, we can talk about the 189 visa. So that's the skilled independent visa. Now, this one I have not seen that many invitations for. Basically, since COVID or even just before COVID, there wasn't a lot of activity with this visa stream. So when I advise my clients, I always tell them, hey, look, this is a great visa. You'll get everything and you'll apply for it. Don't wait on this as your only option because it's pretty hard to get an invitation in this visa. So with this visa, first you need to be invited to apply. So you need to complete an expression of interest on Skills Select. You need to have minimum competent English, which is 6 in each band. You need to have an occupation on the medium to long-term occupation list. So software engineer, ICT business analyst, all those occupations are actually on the long-term occupation list. And you need to score the highest you can because this is based on points basis. So I think previously this program worked really well because you might have some applicants with 65 points. Actually, years ago, the minimum cutoff was 60 points. And years ago, and I don't even know how long I'm actually talking about, yes, people invited at 60 points. If you had 80 points back in the days, oh my gosh, you would have got an invitation like pretty quickly. Like I'm talking days. 80 points these days probably won't even be considered. So I think before COVID hit and all of that, there was a bit of activity with the 189 for IT occupations. You were looking at 95 points. I remember when I was working at the beginning of 2020 in an immigration firm and my senior was actually telling me, 189 visa doesn't matter what occupation. If you don't have 95 points, don't even think about it. However, during COVID, there were some other occupations that were invited under 95 points, so that's very interesting to see as well. Secondly would be the 491 and 190 visa. It is very similar to the 189 in a certain way, that is by invitation only. So you'd have to complete an expression of interest on Skills Select. However, for the 491 and 190, basically you have to be nominated by the state. So one of the states, by South Australia, by Victoria, by New South Wales. So in addition to whatever the legislation says in relation to 491 and 190 to be eligible for an invitation, you also have to be nominated by the state. So you have to go to the state's individual website and review those requirements to see if you meet them. So I'll give you a very basic example. For example, last year in Victoria for the 190 visa, IT occupations was on the hot list. So lots of invitations for IT professionals. However, you had to meet the state requirements. And for example, for IT, the state requirement was that you had to be living and working in Victoria. You had to be using your STEM skills. So in IT, that's pretty easy. Technology skills, that's pretty simple. And you must be working in a target sector. And there was lots of different target sectors. So you could have been an ICT business analyst working in agri-food, or you could be a software engineer working for a hospital, so therefore you're in the health sector. However, there was a whole digital sector. So basically for us, we were like, oh, okay, cool. Well, most of our applicants fit under the digital sector. So that was basically the requirements. You had to complete an expression of interest and Skills Select as before. But for the application to actually be recognized by Victoria, you had to also submit a registration of interest. And then they basically match the two together. And if your application met the criteria, then you'd get a pre-invitation, then you lodge your application, and then this and that after. So that was how the process is. Whereas with New South Wales, it's a little bit different. It was by invitation only, but you didn't have to fill in anything else, but you did have to review the requirements. So there were some requirements such as they had an occupation list, and then some applications they were only inviting onshore. Some occupations needed work experience and some did not. So all very strange. But basically for New South Wales, you just lodge a Skills Select and expression of interest, and you wait for a pre-invitation. So that means that New South Wales was purely based on the occupation ceilings as well as points, which I don't really like that system. I think that there's no transparency. And to be honest, they say it's by points. They say it's by this and that, but people were telling me, hey, I had 95 points, but my friend with the same occupation had 90 points, got invited. And they're like, how did this happen? And they emailed New South Wales, and New South Wales said, that's impossible, that would never happen. But apparently it did, so it's really, really strange. So that's why to me, I'm not a big fan of New South Wales. But again, at the end of the day, New South Wales does invite quite a lot of applicants each year. It's just very hard for me to gauge it, especially when clients engage us as professionals to help them with the application. I want to give them something back. I want to be able to help them strategize and do this and do that. Whereas Victoria, we could write a registration of interest and we could do things to sell themselves and all of that. But in New South Wales, it's just an expression of interest, and how are you supposed to pick the best from that other than from a points perspective? But there is some people that are extremely talented that basically are what the skilled visa program in Australia would be looking for. But they, for example, just can't get that 8 in each band for English, so they lose 10 to the other applicants who have 10 points more, but they have way more experience and they're super, super talented. And I guess that's what the Global Talent Visa program is for. The Global Talent Visa program is very, very high caliber. So we need something in between. So that's a very general, broad overview of the skilled visas. I've done many videos on the skilled visas and the different state requirements, so you can have a look at those videos. I'll drop the link to those videos below. The other two options you have is employer sponsorship. So first of all, you have the temporary skills shortage 482 visa. That visa is not permanent residence. However, it will lead to permanent residence basically. And it's faster processing time. And it is the program that a lot of companies use in Australia. So I highly recommend it. If you are looking to come to Australia and the employer offers you 482, I definitely think take it, because there's always visa pathways. And obviously it's a lot easier if you're onshore to apply for permanent residency, I think. I think they do prioritize onshore applicants first, which absolutely makes sense. So for the 482 visa, I have the relevant qualification plus 2 years full-time work experience. That work experience does not have to be post-qualification, it can be pre-qualification, and you must meet English, health, character requirements. And yes, for this visa stream, the employer is heavily involved, and you need that employer to support your application, so they have to be willing to sponsor you, willing to pay the fees and all of that. So yes, that is a hurdle, and a lot of people think it's very hard. if you weigh up the two, skilled visa is just as hard because you can go and do all these things and you have to wait for an invitation. And I must say sometimes it's got to do with luck. The 482, yes, you have to go find the employer, you have to do this and that. But once that's all done, and once you do meet the requirements, you lodge your application, you have your lawyers that help you do it, making sure you're ticking off all the boxes, it's a very, very high chance you'll get the visa. You better come to Australia and plan your future. So a lot of you are waiting for an invitation for skilled visas, but I really think there's a lot of benefits if you focus on finding an employer to sponsor you. And I can't say this enough, employers are always looking for skilled workers. I just had 2 meetings this morning, one with a client who owns restaurants, wanted to bring chefs to Australia because he just couldn't find chefs here in Australia. Another one owned veterinary clinics and wanted to find vets to work in his veterinary clinic. So there's always the demand there. You just got to look to the right place. And when you're spending all your time and energy on so many things, then basically if your occupation is on the medium term list, if you spend 3 years on that 482 visa in Australia, then you can transfer to the 186, which is permanent residency. I've got a full video of the temporary residence transition stream, so I'll drop that in the link below as well. And then finally, one of the other really good ones would definitely be the 186 direct entry. Direct entry being for permanent residency. You can apply for this onshore or offshore, obviously. Again, the employer is heavily involved in this process. They have to be willing to sponsor you, make the application, and also pay the fees. And the fees are never, cheap. With that one, you need to have the relevant qualification plus 3 years post-qualification work experience in that occupation. You must have a skills assessment as well. You must meet the character, health, and English requirements. A lot of people ask me about this visa. Their employer is willing to sponsor them. How do they go about it? Other than those requirements, 3 years full-time work experience and all of that, I think that is a great visa, especially if you're working for a larger company. But do always know that with any of these employer-sponsored visas, the employer, their application part, they have to prove that there's a genuine need for the sponsorship. And I think a lot of people went ahead and companies went ahead and sponsored people, and there was some non-genuine applications going around, so the department really started to scrutinize them. So just remember that that risk, a little bit of risk is always there. Get the advice from your migration agents and lawyers, and they will be able to advise you accordingly and advise you of the risks involved with that one. And obviously with this one, you can only do it if you have an occupation on the medium term list. However, a lot of IT occupations are on the medium term list. So basically, if I was having a consultation with a client who was an IT professional, that is basically the visa types I would go through with them. I think at the end of the day, it's really important to identify if you had the relevant ICT degree, if you have the relevant ICT work experience, and then which visa subclass would be the best. For us, we always prioritize the employee sponsorship because it's a sure shot. You just have to make sure they meet the requirements from every end, and then you can basically apply, and we should get the grant in X amount of time. However, for skilled visa, although you don't need an employer to support you in the application, it's hard because it's dependent on skilling occupations, it's dependent on the trends in Australia, it's dependent on how many applicants there are. And guys, I'm telling you, there is something like 100,000 skills select applications. There's 100,000 expression of interest sitting there, waiting to be invited. So just think about how lucky you'd have to be to actually get invited. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed that video. In the next video, I'll talk about different pathways for nurses in Australia and also different pathways for engineers in Australia. If you guys are interested in any other videos or anything you'd like to learn about, please drop your comments below and I will do my best to get to them. Thank you for watching. My name is Traci Chen and I will see you guys in the next video.